I think there's ways to work around that, and like different people are learning different ways. I mean, a great example is your buddy. I was watching him throw that whole time, and then I was like, okay, like I kind of see what you're doing. That disc is coming out with speed, but it's just awkward, and better than trying to get him to fix his form right there, which would have taken a little longer, it's going to take more time. I literally like went in my bag. I was like, oh, I see how you're throwing. Pulled out a disc, and I was like, throw this, and immediately, like, it went twice as far as his first drive, and it was like one of his best drives that he'd done that day.
I want to throw the high-speed discs. I want to throw the drivers, because in golf, you don't drive with a wedge. You don't drive with a putter. But in disc golf, you can do that, and that's how you actually build the fundamentals in order to be able to throw those high-speed drivers. Welcome in, everyone, to the Chain Clankers Disc Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Ferris here, joined as always by Horatio Gonzalez. We've got another fantastic episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking about disc speeds, what disc speeds you should be using and throwing in your everyday rounds. It's going to be a ton of fun, ton of information. Let's go ahead and bring in Horatio. How are we doing today, man?
I'm great. You guys listen to this on Monday. We're recording this on Halloween. So happy Halloween to everybody. Hope you had some fun. Hope you got out. I know Quentin put out that story the other day talking about candies and what candy you thought you were. You said, what did you say you were? You were
I can't remember. I literally was trying for the life of me to remember what
Payday? I think you said Payday.
No, it definitely was not Payday. I haven't had a Payday in years. Okay, I said my game right now is like a Baby Ruth. Low-key pretty good, but only in stretches, and then really not good. I feel as though Baby Ruths are heat, but if I had those year-round, I could not eat them year-round. So I can't be good year-round. I can only be good in stretches, then it's really bad, and then gets to being good again.
Yeah, we had some funny, you guys answered some of those. Were pretty good, but good weekend. We got to play this weekend. Met up with some of Quint's friends and a friend of mine also. We played some 2-on-3, did a little Chain Clankers versus some. They don't play as much, so gave them a handicap, but it was fun.
Yeah, that was really fun. It was you and I against those three. We gave them a 8-stroke lead. And it really came down to the wire, which made it so much more fun for literally everyone involved. I definitely recommend if you're somebody who is, playing again, let's say you're advanced and all your friends play in rec or whatever it is, give them a little bit of a handicap and go make your round so much more fun. It's more fun for everyone when it's actually coming down to the wire versus, oh yeah, we know that Tom is going to beat us by 6 strokes today. It's not even worth trying to keep up. He's, just going to kill us. So that's something that I've kind of been doing with my friends who are a little bit newer into the game, just because it's more fun for me and gives me to constantly be striving to go more, because I feel as though there is that time where you're playing in a situation like that. You can take your foot off the gas because you're going to win the round inevitably. So you don't have to push yourself as hard, where the handicap forces you to push yourself as hard. And I mean, we needed literally all 18 holes and then some to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I felt like they definitely also had more fun because I know one of your friends mentioned maybe doing just singles. And that course, it's not the hardest, but it's also not easy, especially for someone that doesn't play very much or a newer player. And if we would have done singles, I don't think they would have had as much fun. Halfway through, it would have been the scores, they would have been, the difference between maybe one of us and one of them would have been like double digits perhaps. And that would have made maybe kind of a buzzkill or, just seeing, I feel like sometimes, I feel like they had more fun because it was a team effort. And, if they had a bad shot or whatnot, they had the rest of the guys there to help them out. I was kind of proud. I feel like I had kind of a proud dad moment. Mike, one of my buddies, he's the one. I mean, he's just the one. I've taught him everything I know. He's the one that goes to play with me the most, and he was on their team, and I feel like he was doing pretty good. And I feel like he kind of felt like he had some pressure to definitely do some of the work. But I felt proud because I feel like he did a good job.
Yeah, he had to make at least 3 putts to kind of keep them in it. And one of my buddies who probably wasn't having the best time getting off the tee, but on 18, it kind of came down to if they make it and get the birdie, then they could win if we miss our par putt, because we both approached and the approach was awful and we hit the same exact tree. So we were left with like a 25 footer. If we get a par and they get a par, we win, we get out of there. But he made the birdie. That was the first birdie putt he had made all day. He makes the birdie, and all of a sudden there's some pressure on us. And thankfully, you were able to make the putt. We get sent into the first playoff hole. We were able to take it down. But it was a ton of fun and definitely something I recommend with you. Maybe you're doing singles and you're doing that, or maybe you're just doing, team stuff. It made it a lot more fun for me. And I think that you are hitting the nail on the head here. It wasn't a buzzkill, because it really would have been you and I under par, Joey, what? I don't know, plus
Plus a
three,
couple. Yeah.
2 or 3. And then my two friends probably would have been in the 15 to 30 range, I'd say. Just because they are significantly newer out of everyone who was there. So yeah, it was a good time overall. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and thank today's sponsor, Disc Dot. Disc Dot is the first of its kind training aid for your disc golf putting routine. The Disc Dot is a brightly colored focal point that clips onto a single chain link to help you consistently and effectively aim small and create lasting muscle memory that translates to fewer missed putts. With many highly visible colors to choose from, the Disc Dot reduces eye strain while providing improved focus and instant feedback, allowing for practice routine to be more effective, fun, and rewarding. Disc Dot will raise your confidence on the green and help you make those big putts. It certainly has for us. We had to make, I don't know, 5 or 6 circle 2 putts just to be able to stay in it. And I truly believe that Disc Dot is a big reason why we were able to make those putts. And another great thing about Disc Dot is it's made in the USA, family owned and operated, and in their first year of business has sold over 25,000 units worldwide. They sponsor both amateur and professional touring players like Kristen Tatar, Garrett Gurthie, Gavin Rathbum, Jessica Weiss, and many more. You can find the Disc Dot and other very useful putting tools on their website, www.disc.usa.com. Again, www.disc.usa.com. And if you use the code Chain Clankers at checkout, you can save yourself 10% in strokes on the putting green. Again, guys, if you didn't listen to last episode where we actually bring on Disc.USA, talk to them about putting, talk to them about the product and why it's such a good product. Use that promo code Chain Clankers, save yourself 10%. We highly recommend going over there and thank them for sponsoring today's episode of the Chain Clankers Disc Golf Podcast. If you appreciate it, like I said, we've said it with other big events on the Pro Tour. It's all about that ROI. If you can show your sponsors an ROI, a return on investment, they're going to continue to come back to you and want to be with you and want to work with you. So this is just as important for us as it is for the Pro Tour getting those sponsorships that they get. Without further ado, though, I think it is time to get into the main portion of today's episode. We're going to be talking about disc speeds, and maybe we can kind of even turn this into what are the flight numbers in disc golf? Like, what do they mean? If you're just coming into disc golf, what is the purpose of these numbers on the discs? What do they do? Horatio, can you break that down for everyone at home?
Yeah, and you'll probably be a lot better at this. I know when you go buy discs, you're a lot more methodical and you look at the numbers. I really don't believe in the numbers a whole lot. And like, I look at them, I'm like, cool, like for the speeds mostly. But besides that, I guess if we're talking about mainly like speeds and not gliding, all that other stuff. Um, but I feel like a lot of discs, I don't know, you'll have similar numbers, but then they fly this different numbers and they'll fly the same or whatever. I don't pay attention to numbers that much, is what I'm saying. But the speed is the one that I probably pay attention to the most. I mean, and you have your putters, there are 1 to 3, and then you have approaches that are somewhere in that 2 to 4, and then your mids are usually always in that 4 to 6 range, typically 5s. Typically, most of the mids I've seen are 5s. And then your fairways are in that 7 to 9, sometimes even the 10, I feel. And then your high speed distance drivers are in that 10 to 13. I know you just got a crank. That's a 13.
Yeah, and Westside even has 14 if you're crazy.
Yeah, which is wild. Like, you have to have like an absolute cannon to be able to throw those how they're meant to be thrown. I know some people would buy lighter weight discs that are 13 and 4 or 12, and they don't have the arm and they don't throw very hard, but for them, it's flying incorrectly, but it works. So they still use those discs. So even though the disc isn't flying correctly because they don't have the arm speed for it, it still works for them because of either how they throw or what they're wanting to do. And so I think people do that a lot, and that's kind of a mistake or something that newer players make, or that a lot when people talk about newer players buying high speed discs. I think that's a lot of what people mean is they buy discs and they just kind of figure out how to throw them, and they think that that's how they fly. They think that that's just how they are supposed to fly. But if you gave that to a pro or to someone with a much higher speed, they could get that disc to actually do what it's supposed to.
Yeah, so just like that overall breakdown of what the numbers on the disc mean, that first number you're going to see is exactly what Horatio was indicating. It's that speed. So the thing about speed is it is how hard you have to throw the disc for every other number to actually matter and for it to do what it says it's going to do. So if you have a disc, like Horatio was kind of saying, that's a 12-13 speed, you have to throw it at a 12-13 like speed coming out of your arm. Like you have to be throwing, you have to be ripping on that disc for it to then do the glide and the turn and the fade. Where if it's a 7-speed disc or a 5-speed disc, you don't have to throw it as hard, which is why we definitely recommend start off by learning putters and mids, because you don't have to throw those as hard. So as you're getting used to the motion of disc golf, you're able to find success and increase your distance so much more. That second number that you're looking at there is the glide. So that's kind of how long the disc is supposed to stay in the air. So a disc with more glide, like a 5 or a 6, is going to stay in the air significantly longer if thrown correctly than a disc with a 3 or 4 glide. The next number over is the turn. So that kind of indicates how much the disc is going to go to the right. The more into the negative, the more right it should go. So if you have a disc with a -4, that sucker should be going to the right. But again, it's all about your angles and it's about how you're throwing the disc and your speed on the disc that makes the disc actually go that direction. You know, you could throw a -4 speed, or excuse me, -4 turn disc on a Spikeiser, and it's probably not going to be going to the right a whole lot. So the final number is that fade. So that kind of indicates how much the disc is going to go to the left, the likelihood to go to the left, because most discs naturally finish to the left. So if you have a disc with a 0 turn and a 3 fade, that sucker is going to probably go a little bit straight and then it's going to go left and then it's really going to finish left as the speed goes down. So it's really, really important that you understand how hard you can throw a disc. And it's okay to not be able to throw the disc super hard. It's okay if you're not that guy or gal who throws distance drivers. That is truly a-okay. I mean, look at Horatio. You throw 1 or 2 of them. I have 3 or 4 that I kind of mess around with, but I'm trying to use fairways more. It's one of those things where you have to be methodical about what you're picking. And so one of the guys I was playing with the other day, he was saying that he has 2 discs, like a, I think like 11 and a 9 speed or something like that. And he was saying that the 11 goes too far to the left and the 9 goes too far to the right. So he needs a 10 speed. And in my head, I was like, well, that's not exactly how it works. You know, it could be how you're holding the disc, the grip on the disc, you know, just the wind on that scenario, you know, all different factors. And it really, I don't want to beat a dead horse. This is the last thing I'll say before I throw back to you for your show. It's just, I think the biggest barrier to entry mentally is I want to throw the high speed discs. I want to throw the drivers, because in golf, you don't drive with a wedge. You don't drive with a putter. But in disc golf, you can do that. And that's how you actually build the fundamentals in order to be able to throw those high speed drivers.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And it's also like what is advertising, like what's cooler, like it's what the good people are throwing. It's what my friend that taught me is throwing. They're throwing the drivers, and but they've been playing for a long time, so it's that misconception, and people want. I literally have a friend who used to go out with us, and he would borrow discs out of my bag, and I'd be like, hey, you need to like throw this, like this will help you improve, and it'll tell me what you're doing, and based off of that, I'll kind of be able to help you or give you certain discs. And he's like, no, he's like, I don't want that. That's a mid. Like I need to go as far as possible. He's like, I don't want that. Like, give me a driver. And like, he wouldn't, like, he did not believe that he could get it as far because it was a mid and he wanted the driver. And so I think for like the rest of the round, like just to prove a point, I was just driving with my putter and I was getting it like twice as far as he was. And I was like I was still getting some birdies because I was just trying to prove a point like, hey, like it doesn't really matter. But if I throw that driver the same way I'm throwing the putter, like it would be like 100 feet longer. And it's something really cool. You start to see when someone's really improving because you can tell people that, but they don't believe it. And it's stubborn and they stick to it. I have a buddy who I've told him that, and he's gotten better at it, throwing a lot more understable stuff, throwing mids, and he still throws like a Hades, and because it just flies good, but it's a high speed driver. And now that he's recently been throwing a lot more mids and understable stuff, but especially mids, and improved his form and his technique, on a lot of the holes that he was throwing the Hades every time, he can't throw them anymore because he'll throw it the same way that he normally did. And he goes past the basket. He's either super far or like just kind of way to the right because he's getting them to like flip up and stand up. And so like those discs don't work anymore for him. And so he finally believes it because he saw it himself. They're like, oh crap, like, okay, this disc is too fast for this hole. You must you guys might have heard people say that before, either on here or just your friends, like, oh, yeah, you don't want to throw that disc. It's too fast for this hole. And so, the course that I play a lot right now, it's set up on the shorts, and we typically play it on the shorts just because it's quicker. But, some of the typical holes, there may be 270 to 320, so somewhere along there. For some people, if you're a beginner, yeah, 310, that's pretty far. That's still like a par three hole. But if you've been paying for a while and you've improved quite a bit, 270 is way too short for a distance driver. If you've improved and you have a good grasp on your form and your discs, you don't really want to throw something like a Hades. For me, that's my long range bombers. That's something where I get up to a hole that's, 380 to 400 something, and I want to get absolutely as far as possible. I'm not necessarily going for accuracy. I'm just trying to get as far as possible, as close as possible to the pin. And so something like that, I'm not going to throw on a hole that is 270 to 290. That disc is too fast. I can, and I would just have to slow it down a bunch and throw in a way that I'm not used to throwing. I would have to like totally slow down my X step and like not pull through as hard and just slow it down a ton. I would still be able to do it, but it's not natural. And when you do stuff like that, it messes your form up because now you're changing your form instead of changing your disc. So in that scenario, now he's disking down. So he's throwing a fairway, or a lot of times you can just throw a overstable disc, something that doesn't needs a little bit more power, but it's still going to fade to the left. And so that's something that he's starting to learn and pick up on himself. And hopefully newer players would pick up on that a lot sooner because I think they would improve their game, is learning that, okay, maybe right now disking down doesn't seem like the right thing, but eventually you get to the point where that high speed disc isn't necessary for a lot of the courses that most of us are playing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, most of the time, I'd say a broad base, most of the courses are not going to be 400 plus every single time. And so something that's really interesting to me is you told me about it. I want to say over the summer, how you would play like the little 5 hole loop stretch at your local course. And you would, first time through, throw putters, and then you'd throw the mids the next time, and then the fairway the next time. And it was like the mids and putters are going the same distance as the fairway. If there's any difference, it's minimal at best, and it doesn't really show a difference. So it's one of those things that even in my own field work, when I throw a mid, a fairway, and a distance, it's like, well, there's not a whole lot of difference sometimes. So you should work on what's going to make your form better, what's going to show you those holes, because anyone can pick up a destroyer and just absolutely grip lock it. But if you throw it high enough, it's going to finish to the left, or it'll inevitably maybe be straight on with where you were at. It's not going to just fall into the ground to the right like a Hades would if you grip locked a Hades. So it's one of those things where I really do think that you can actually learn so much more about yourself and your form by disking down. And this is a broad thing to all new players. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know because you're open to suggestions and ideas and you want to be getting better. But when you've been playing with somebody who's been playing significantly longer than you, take their advice. Take our advice, take the pros' advice. Don't just write it off and not work on it. I think one of the things that I've seen from new players recently that I've kind of played with, excluding my buddies, just, random guys and gals out on the course, is, when they get a piece of advice, they throw it one or two times, doesn't go perfect like they thought it was going to, and then they go right back to what they were doing. So I could be like, hey, you need to have a longer reach back and let's throw this mid range instead of this distance driver. And it goes, I don't know, maybe even it goes like 30 feet less than what they were throwing. And they're like, oh, well, this is silly. I didn't go as far, but you got better, right? It's one of those things where you're getting better because look at the difference. You're throwing a 12 speed and a 5 speed, and the 12 speed only went 30 feet more. Like, you can easily get your 5 speed distance to cover that. And I think a true barometer that I would say for most people is you want to be able to throw your putter 200 feet. I think that is the kind of big goal, is that get that putter to be able to go 150, 200 feet. Now, that's really hard. That was tough for me when I was just getting into it. And that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of dedication. But if you listen to our episode with Cody Deal, the guy went from brand new to playing local pro within a year because of that dedication. You have to embrace the suck. You have to be okay with being bad for a bit so that you can get better. The only way to succeed is through failure. You can't just succeed without anything to kind of show you the way to be successful. And so it's one of those things where I think 150, 200 feet is kind of where I would put the putter range. 200 to 300, I think that's kind of your, all right, I'm throwing mids here. I'll throw an occasional fairway driver depending on the shot or something like that. Like I still personally will choose, 280 or something like that. I'm still probably going to whip out my fairway driver, but I'm personally also working on trying to, do the mid instead of the fairway driver right there. And then I would say, you get to that 330, 350, that's, kind of your fairway driver mark. And then 350 plus, pull out that distance driver, pull out that bomber, and let's see what happens. But Horatio and I, we even literally played with this guy at the last league night of the year or something like that, who probably was throwing a Judge as far as we were throwing a Hades and Enigma, which, are two distance drivers. And this man was throwing a Judge just as far, if not further, than what we were throwing.
Yeah, that man is a lunatic. And I know for a while he was only throwing putters to try to heal and work on his form. And that's something that I would recommend to a lot of people. Me and my buddy have been really focusing on improving our sidearm because that's something, we set aside and we've been trying to work on it a lot. So we've put the backhand on the back burner. We're not throwing it as much. So the other day when we were playing, my backhand was just not there. I could not figure it out. So I was like, this is ticking me off. Like, my shot was just off. And so I went to my putters for 3 holes. I was like, I'm only going to throw my putters and throw them as my actual drive. And within about 3 holes, I had my backhand tuned back in because my putters are the Discmania Senseis, super straight, understable, and you can't mess your form up when throwing those. If you yank it or whatever, you pull it too hard or something, you're going to overturn it, you're going to turn it into a roller, or if you're hyzering it, it's just going to kind of fade out or whatever. And so the way that I throw, I had to get that sensei to fly just how I wanted, and then my feeling, that muscle memory came back because I had to get it to do kind of a hyzer flip and kind of a low kind of a fade for it to work. And that's something I would recommend to you guys if you're having troubles with your backhand, or I guess I don't know about sidearm. Sidearm for me is different. I haven't improved it very much yet to be able, to give that same statement. But definitely for backhand, if you're struggling with it, or if you can't figure your form out, stick to those putters. If you're having a hard time, if you haven't played in a few weeks and your backhand just feels off, go to your putter, or something understable, and figure it out and get it to where it's flying straight, it's flying like you want it to, and then your form and your throw will definitely come back. But you were talking about telling giving advice to buddies or whoever, and then like kind of trying it but they're not really believing it. I think there's ways to work around that, and like different people are learning different ways. I mean, a great example is your buddy. I was watching him throw that whole time, and then I was like, okay, like I kind of see what you're doing. That disc is coming out with speed, but it's just awkward, and better than trying to get him to fix his form right there, which would have taken a little longer, it's going to take more time. I literally like went in my bag. I was like, oh, I see how you're throwing. Pulled out a disc, and I was like, throw this, and immediately like it went twice as far as his first drive, and was like one of his best drives that he'd done that day. And then next hole, I was like, hey, try one more. And he outdrove every single one of us. And that was just because of disc selection. And me watching him and knowing, I'm like, okay, that disc you're throwing is too fast and too overstable. So I gave him something slower and more understable. And it was a little bit nose high. If he had had that like nice and flat, that thing would have been gone. Um, but that was because I know my discs, and just watching him. So, when someone tells you something, especially if they've been playing longer, listen to them. Like they might know what they're talking about. I know after that, he was like, oh, was that a Roadrunner? I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to pick up one of those. Like he believed it because he threw it, and he saw it for himself, like in action.
Yeah, it's truly so nice to be able to say something, see it happen, because you're right. I mean, it literally was night and day. He outdrove everybody, had CTP. And so it's really one of those things where if he continues to play and works on his form, I mean, he could be an absolute bomber. Like he's got just natural speed coming off of that disc, which is so nice to see. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where I also think it's hard when your buddies are giving you advice, because it's like, I don't know, for me, half of me is like, yeah, okay, I'll listen. The other half is like, all right, shut up, guy. I can figure this out myself. But that's just who I am as a person. And I do, I can understand how that's kind of tough, which that's why we want this podcast to be an outlet. Let us be those other guys who are telling you, hey, maybe you should think about trying this. Maybe you should do this, because these things will help your game. Because it's one of those things where you can be in the perpetual, you know, I drive 150 feet with my Wraith, and it always goes super far to the left. And, I'm lucky if I'm getting a bogey. You can stay there if you want. But if you want to challenge yourself, if you want to get better, we really think that changing up your disc speed is a great way to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's been great. I think we should finish this up with, 5 discs that we personally recommend that everyone should have in their bags. This is going to be more, newer players or people that have been playing for a couple of years. 5 discs that we personally think. And mine, unfortunately, might be a little bit biased because yes, I throw mainly discraft, but I throw a lot of other stuff also. But I said it from the very beginning. I wanted to focus on the discs, and I didn't want to overwhelm myself with so many companies. If you were open to, it's not bad, but if you're open to throwing any plastic, any company, it's hundreds, like maybe even thousands, different options, and that's just confusing and overwhelming. So that's from the beginning. I like stuck to Discraft, and then I, other Innova and Discmania and stuff, but it's mainly Discraft. So that's what a lot of mine might be. But I would say, my 5 discs that I would recommend that everyone should have in their bag, or if you have a new buddy or someone you want to recommend them picking up some discs, I would say the very first one, a Mako 3. And I really love the Star Mako, the plastics. That disc is something that for a new player who is, everybody does that hyzer, it comes out and just fades left. With a new Star Mako, it'll probably do that if they're throwing the very typical, not a lot of power, kind of slow arm speed, it's going to do that, but it might go a little further. But once they're able to get it a little straighter and put a little more power on it, it will fly really, really straight and be super friendly. And then eventually, once you improve, that's a disc you can keep in your bag, forever, because eventually that can become like a hyzer flip disc and like a tunnel disc, something that just dead straight. You can figure it out. So yeah, Star Mako 3, and then I would say a Discraft Soul, because those are just also super straight. So the Star Mako 3 has a much more deeper rim, and the Soul, I would say, it flies similar. It's also very straight, very forgiving. But once you start to throw it with bad form or bad technique, it's going to be way off. So it'll let you know. But the rim is a lot more shallow. It's not as deep. It feels a lot better. So some people might like the shallow rim. Some people might like the deep rim. So Star Mako 3, Discraft Soul. And then I would say once you start to get arm speed and once you start to get more used to, I guess, power, something overstable that is great for sidearms and for backhand. If you just need something to go pretty straight but with a hard finish, uh, Discraft Raptor. That's something that I've had from day one, and I still throw to today because that's just my kind of overstable fairway speed. You can throw on a flex shot, you can throw it on a sidearm, and it's just going to be a hyzer disc. Even once you get more arm speed and you start to throw farther distance, that disc will always be consistent. Um, I would say that's similar to like the Innova Firebird. I feel like that's probably the same kind of disc. So it's just like a fairway, overstable fairway. So the another one I would do for like a distance is a Hades, which those are getting really hard to find, and really they were actually in stock a few weeks ago, and I ordered a couple more. But they're like back ordered like 2 weeks. I haven't gotten them yet. They said it was gonna be like 2 3 weeks before I got them. So just watch out for that. Something for long range distance, something that when you're new, you'll be able to get distance, but then once you improve and you figure it out, you'll be able to learn and do that hyzer flip, and you'll be able to get another 100 feet out of that disc once you figure it out. So that's a disc. When you're new, if you absolutely have to have a distance driver, the Hades is super forgiving and it'll give you like immediate distance. But then once you get more power, it can be, a hyzer flip bomber. So that's 4. The last one I would say, putter, definitely always start with something understable, something straight, something that's going to be not fade. Because when you putt, you want to just kind of point at the basket and shoot right at it without any fade or anything like that. So something understable and straight. And absolutely get something that feels good. You might buy something and be like, this feels all right, and I think I can make this work. And then you try to get used to it, but then it's not quite 100% comfort in your hand. So yeah, real quick, super understandable. Personally, I throw Discmania Sensei. It's a much the rim isn't as deep. So if you guys can see a pattern, I like discs with, the rim isn't super deep because it's more comfortable and I feel like it comes out of my hand better. So Discmania Sensei, Discraft Soul, and Star Mako 3 for mids. And then a Discraft Hades and a Discraft Raptor or like a Firebird, something like that to have in the bag.
Yeah, those are really good options. If I had to give a couple of suggestions, I think two mids that are pretty sneaky. The first one is the Discraft Archer. I've only seen this in a handful of stores before. My fiance has one, and it's like a -4-1 when it comes to turn and fade. So it's one of those that's kind of like the Road Runner of mid ranges, where you're going to be able to get that puppy to go to the right. You're going to be able to throw it straight. If you throw it on a hyzer, it's going to go to the left. So it's one of those things where I think it's not as domey as the Soul. So for me, it's easier to kind of grab, and it comes in ESP plastic, where I don't think the Soul comes in ESP plastic, or if it does, I have yet to see it in ESP plastic. So the Archer is definitely a really good one, and you probably will have a little bit better luck getting your hand on an Archer. Just if you're looking around, and even if you have to buy it on eBay, it's not like it's going to be $50. So I really like the Archer. I think it's definitely one to try out for sure. Another one is a MA3 from Prodigy. It's kind of my go-to mid-range right now. You can get a little bit of turn on it. You can get fade on it, throw it straight. It's really all dependent on how you throw the disc and your form and stuff like that. So I think that's a really good one. I kind of like the rim to be just a tad bit bigger so I can get my hand around it. I feel like awkward holding the disc. I'm not sure exactly how to hold the disc to like get it in my hand and my fingers on it for a power grip. So I do like that disc a lot. That's one I've been using. And then as we kind of move up the totem pole, I would say the Discmania Instinct is a good one. It's a 7502. So I think in my opinion, especially for newer players, I think that should be more your overstable disc compared to a Firebird or a Raptor or something like that, because a Raptor, Onyx, Firebird, all of those things are like crazy overstable for new folk into the game. So even if you're throwing a sidearm, I think that you have to have a little bit of juice before you can kind of throw those, where the Instinct, I think, gives you enough overstability to where at first it's going to be overstable, but the more that you get better and the more you work the disc in, it's going to go straighter and then sometimes even go to the right a little bit, and it'll help you learn that sidearm without being dependent on the disc being a dump truck to get it to do what you want. Because same thing in my opinion applies, where if the disc is just so overstable that it does what you want, you can be faking yourself into thinking that you have good form for the sidearm. So I think that's a good one, and that's very easily available to go out and get, not that expensive. Let's see here. I got two more. I think another good fairway is a Roadrunner. I mean, I personally have not thrown one a whole lot, but just seeing what I saw from my buddy the other day, instantly picking up a Roadrunner and getting CTP and just absolutely bombing it, that's one that I would look into. The Underworld is pretty good as well. I think both of those are good. A Maverick is something that I would definitely recommend. That's kind of going to be a little bit more neutral. It'll go to the right a little bit. So I think kind of somewhere in that range is where you want to be. And then the distance driver that I'm going to go with, I know that the Hades is a really good one. It is hard to get your hand on Hades, so I'm actually going to say the Crank SS. One of our good friends told us about the Crank SS and said it's a really good disc, and I actually picked it up and I started to throw it, and I definitely do see the hype around it, and it's definitely going to be easier to get your hands on than a Hades right now. So I think the Crank SS is similar to the Nuke SS, but I think there's more turn there in the Crank SS than there is in the Nuke SS. So that is 10 plus discs, because I know I gave a couple of extras that we recommend you go out and get just based on disc speed. If we can say one final thing, guys, really learn your form, learn the disc. Don't feel like you have to throw distance drivers, because that is not going to help you. As we close out the show, make sure you head over to disc.usa.com, use our promo code Chain Clankers, save yourself 10%. No reason to be paying full price when you can use a discount code. We will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure you do hit that subscribe, follow button, leave a comment. What's your favorite disc to go with? Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Chain Clankers podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers, and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us from so you never miss another episode.